those of Rogers or Rogers TV.
Okay. Randy Prasad is here, and I just realized, oh my God, I had to actually sit back and realize, what was my name again? Folks, welcome back to Cable 10 Live. I'm Randy Prasad. 905-848 Live is the number to call. You could join me here at the round table. Now, we're doing something a little different right now. We're here to talk about the provisions to the Highway Traffic Act that's happened here in Ontario, Bill 31. And there's some changes when we think about distracted driving, or when we think about cyclists and some of the new laws that are coming in, and just a lot of changes that you guys may need to be aware of. We got a really great team of lawyers on deck right now, and sometimes it's kind of intimidating because I'm like, what did I do? I swear I gotta watch myself with you guys. No, I'm kidding. From Singer, Kewinter, personal and injury law, we have Jason Katz and Ari Singer. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is great. You know what? So let's get back and start and look at Bill 31. So we have new provisions that are kicked in. Before we even get to that, what are some of the common occurrences or cases that you find through your law practice that deals with traffic and traffic incidences or crimes, or maybe let's say accidents, that could easily be avoided with some common sense tips? So let's kick off with that. What are some of the things where you kind of slap your head, it's like, why did they do that? If they just knew this, what would come to mind? Not to take business away from you.
No, listen. We're happy. We're happy not to take these cases in if it means you got people not getting into bad accidents and suffering injuries. Yeah. But basically, one of the #1 rules we see is there's a lot of rear-end collisions.
Right.
And so following too closely behind other vehicles is something in Toronto especially, and in Brampton and Mississauga, with such busy roads and people so upset and driving aggressively, you often see they're in such a rush to get to wherever they're going, and that ends up leading to an accident and leading to additional problems.
Right. Yourself, what were your thoughts of that?
I got to go with cell phones.
Yeah.
We see it every day. We see it while driving here.
Yeah.
You see the person slowly coming into your lane and then pulling back at the last moment.
There's a case.
And then
no.
And then as you're walking by, you can see them.
Yeah.
And people are walking and texting, and it's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, let's look at distracted driving and cell phones in particular. There was some provisions for Bill 31. They've increased the fine for distracted driving up to $1,000. I think it was like $280 beforehand, but now if you're caught being distracted, it goes up to $1,000. Let's look at the term. What is distracted driving? And does that provision only occur if you're caught with a cell phone in hand staring at a screen? What does that term distraction mean?
So there's a couple of different definitions, and it's actually defined quite specifically in the Highway Traffic Act. It deals with displays. If you have a computer or a television set in the car, it deals with wireless handheld devices like a cell phone, and it deals with entertainment devices like an iPod. Okay. And basically, the law prevents you from not only using, but even holding these devices in your hand while driving. You have to be off the road, stopped, and away from traffic in order to use these devices. So if you're on the road, even if you're stopped at a stoplight or at a red light or in traffic, if you are even holding your phone, technically you're breaking the law under the Highway Traffic Act.
Okay. That's right. So even if it's buzzing or whatnot, you just don't even touch it. Make sure the car is parked.
That's
but you made an interesting point about, we have navigation screens on our cars right now, and we're touching. They're not cell phones, but we are engaged in an activity. What's your advice to that? Just don't touch the screen.
Well, the law gives you, the Act gives you a specific exclusion when it comes to things like the navigation system in the car that actually assist you in your driving, helping you get to where you want to go.
Right. Let's even look at some of the increase in fines. Cyclists, for example, could face up to $500 an increase in fines for not having required bicycle light gear or reflectors on deck, and that's part of the new provisions of Bill 31. Are fines the answer? I know we're not in a position to question or judge laws, but what I'm trying to look at is, if you want to change things, I don't know if fines change things as much as creating a social conversation about that. I mean, do fines traditionally help in these in increasing them? Will it help the cause?
I think the problem, I think it's a great point, and I think that increasing the fines up to $1,000, and there is now 3 demerit points that you'll lose,
Right.
and if you're a novice driver, you actually will have your license suspended for 30 days. But I think these are fairly, in the overall grand scheme of things, fairly minor.
Right.
And I think I read a statistic recently where distracted driving as of 2016 will actually pass drinking and driving as the #1 cause of deaths on our roadways in Ontario. So I think you are correct that the fines will not be enough. I think society as a whole has to take a more progressive and proactive approach to dealing with this. Much like MAD and other great organizations have dealt with drinking and driving, I think that society as a whole has to say, enough, this is not acceptable. Because even on our way driving here, on the highway, you know, you look to your left, you look to your right, people are holding their phones, they're distracted on their phones. It's just so commonplace and it's so accepted now. It's almost like you can't wait to leave the office to get in your car so you can return some texts and make some calls, and I think that has to change.
If I may ask, have you ever dealt with cases involving drinking and driving? Any client bases that have been involved with that?
I have.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking, because I think it's very important to kind of articulate maybe the sense of remorse or their thought processes coming now to a lawyer to defend their case. Can you talk about some of maybe like the worry or the fear or the regret that they may go through now that they're faced with this as maybe as a learning mechanism for audience out there that may think it's okay to test the waters one more time? What goes through their mind knowing that now they're sober and now they can't believe they're in this predicament?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I've seen in my practice was you'd have workers who work in the construction industry. And so these are guys who have really good jobs.
Right.
And then they go out and then they have a few drinks.
Right.
And then the next day they have a few drinks and they hang out together. And then what happens is if they get a conviction for drinking and driving, all of a sudden they can't drive. They can't drive to a job site.
That's right.
Their license is suspended. They might not be able to get insurance anymore. So even when the suspension is over, they might not be able to drive anymore. So all of a sudden they can't get to work anymore. And that's because they had a couple drinks with their friends at night, and it just kept going. So we have in our society just, it's a couple drinks. But then once the penalties really kick in, all of a sudden they realize their lives are completely different. They can't get jobs in other areas. One of the big differences between the fines and the criminal conviction is basically when you have a criminal conviction, it has a major impact on your ability to make a living.
Wow. And let's look at, you hear a lot of stories when water cooler talk. Certain people who would test the waters of whether if it's, you know, device holding or drinking and driving, and they get away with it, they don't get pulled over, and they come out with these certain accusations. Well, they have certain rights, like police cannot ask you to have a breathalyzer. They must contact your lawyer first. Can you talk about some of the myths that go on at the point of being pulled over for questioning with a police officer, and how a lawyer should be interjected and at what cause, and when should a lawyer be brought into play?
So whenever you're pulled over by a police officer, there are different tests of what they can do and at different stages. So they can pull you over if you're driving, and they can talk to you.
Okay.
You don't have to say anything back, but they can talk to you.
Okay.
Most of the advice I always give is to cooperate.
Sure, absolutely.
And then there are different steps that they can do. They can make a demand for a screening device. They can also make a demand for another type of device if you're at a ride program. I can actually say from personal experience, if you say that you have even one drink when you're at a ride program, they will take you aside to blow into a device. You have rights, but the law also says that you need to cooperate. Right. So once they read you your rights, there's a very specific clause of a demand, and it's very specific wording. And you have the right to speak to a lawyer before you do it. But there's also provision you can't outright refuse a demand. The criminal code has developed that if you completely decline the demand, the penalties are actually the same as if you're convicted.
Right.
So by being difficult, if you're, just want to stand up for your rights, which you have the right to do, you can actually get in more trouble than, if you'll just pass the breathalyzer.
A big popular topic that's been around in the papers leading into the Pan Am Games was the high occupancy vehicle lanes. And there's been some comedic stories that has come out where people had put mannequins in the cars to suggest that there's more passengers than there really are. Can you speak to us about the specific rules and responsibilities of those lanes? Because now we're leading into the Pan Am Games, and I understand that the rules have changed again, so now I'm a little bit unclear. I've heard at the Pan Am Game levels, you can have only 3 people in the high occupancy lanes, but now at the Pan Am Games, when they're on, it's down to 2 occupancies. I'm not sure, I don't, but what are some of the things to look out for now we have an introduction of new lanes on our roads?
Again, we're no experts in
these
HOV
traffic,
lanes,
right.
but I'll tell you from, I believe I read that it is back down to 2 people in the vehicle that now are allowed to use the lane. So hopefully there won't be as much abuse of the lanes, and hopefully the highways themselves will not be quite as busy as they have been over the last number of weeks. So
what's one of your common tips do you tell people out there when they're out and driving? You're saying obviously not to text and drive. What are common cases, even outside of driving, that you would suggest some advice to the general public prior to getting involved with being hiring on with a lawyer? What would be the first thing that comes to your mind?
In terms of driving to avoid accidents, I think give yourself enough time to get where you're going. Again, living in the Brampton and Mississauga and Toronto area, it's so the roads are so congested now with construction and too many vehicles on the road. It just takes a lot longer than you anticipate. And so if you give yourself more time, you're not going to be as stressed. And number 2 is use the opportunity in the car to focus on driving as opposed to eating a sandwich, talking on the phone, or doing whatever people do. There's so many other distractions out there and other bad drivers on the road now that I think people need more to pay more attention and take driving more seriously.
Exactly. I did snicker at one of the new changes from Bill 31, and I read that. I couldn't believe it. It says, if you're thinking about painting your vehicle chrome yellow, you can't, as the bill clarifies that only school buses can be painted in chrome yellow. So there, folks, or anyone with your Camaros or your Corvettes, chrome yellow is out of the way. Where can we find your address for your new location really quickly, and where can we contact you guys?
2 County Court Drive in Brampton, right across from the courthouse. SingerQuinter.com. 416-961-2882 is our number. We also have a 1-800 number. So lots of ways to reach
24 hours?
us. Any time of day.
Exactly.
We're always around.
Twitter, Facebook.
All of them.
Awesome. We'll give them a good like right on there. Thank you guys so much for being on deck.
Thank you for having us.
And best of luck to your future endeavors. Folks, that's it for us here on Cable 10 Live. I'm Randy Prasad. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more of everything that's happening all around the 4 corners of Peel Region. Good night, folks.